All right, well, welcome to the DFL Before DNF podcast. My name is Josh Rosenthal. We've been exploring the topic of late race survival, really in the context of 100 milers. But today I'm super excited to have my new friend Tamar Hicks join me. I've been a fan of his for a while, watching what he does on Instagram, which it's funny how much, stuff is out there on Instagram to consume. And I mostly in the realm of ultra marathon, but I don't know, Instagram thought that I needed to see what Tamar is doing. And so serves it up quite a bit, but it's good. I don't know how else to describe it other than it's useful. And I think that's what I need right now in my journey, to get my next 100 miler under my belt. I've DNF'd 7 of my 8 attempts at the 100-mile distance, and I just love it so much. I'm going to go again, despite the evidence, saying that it doesn't warrant me going again. I just love it too much, though. But this time I'm trying to gather wisdom from specialists, generalists in the field, just to help me get better on race day. So I'm super excited for it, but glad to have Tamar. Before we go into specialty, I want to get to know you as a person. So how about you tell me a little bit about yourself? Where'd you grow up? Where are you from?
Yeah, so I'm from Dallas, Texas. I actually grew up, born and raised in Dallas, Texas. That's really where all of my roots are. I have
Okay. Where'd you
family
go
in
to high school?
Arkansas, at Mansfield Timberview. It's in the Arlington area.
Okay.
Yeah,
My
so
brothers went to Western Hills High School in
okay,
West Fort Worth.
okay. Yeah, it's not too bad. It's probably, I would say 30, 40 minutes away from me.
Okay. Nice.
Yeah, and actually, so my family is from Arkansas, from the Little Rock, really a small town, Pine Bluff, Wabaseka, Arkansas. But my
Mm-hmm.
parents actually moved to Dallas when I was born. So the house that I grew up in, they bought like the day before I was born. It's a crazy story, but
Yeah.
yeah. So I never lived in Arkansas, but those are like kind of like in my roots because that's essentially where they came straight from and
Did you go
started
there for the holidays
their
and stuff?
yeah. I've been to Arkansas quite a bit. In recent years, not as much. Now that I'm kind of been a lot more independent. Ever
Yeah.
since moving away. But and after college, really, when I got to college is when it really started slowing down for me, going back and forth from Dallas, Arkansas. But yeah, so I've been in Dallas my whole life except for
Nice.
the 9 years I was in Houston. I went to college at Lamar University, which is a about an hour outside of Houston in Beaumont, Texas.
Oh,
And
wow. Yeah.
so I in that part of my life, I was back and forth to Houston all the time because Beaumont is a relatively small city, so a lot of the things that you want to do, you normally are going to take that drive, especially as a college
Yeah.
student.
Yeah. Were you running in college?
Yes, actually. So I ran essentially my whole life. I started running in seventh grade, and I really was just kind of doing it for fun.
Yeah.
I didn't start taking running and track seriously until my junior year of high school, when I got the opportunity to run varsity because someone had got injured, and so I was their alternate, and I got to go to regionals, and it
Wow.
was just amazing experience. And so that's really where I was like, you know what, I can probably try to do something with this. And
Yeah.
so towards the end of that my junior year, my senior year, that's when I really, really got involved in running. And I had the pleasure of being on, at the time, the number one 4x4 in the nation because of
Oh,
my teammate. He was Aldridge Bailey. I don't know if you maybe heard him if you're into track like that, but
I
he had
haven't.
the 400 record, the high school 400 record. So he was running 41 or 45-1,
No way.
at
Gosh.
17 years old, and he was our
Gosh.
anchor. So
So did
because
did
of
he
that, I
win
was
state?
exposed. Yeah, he did win state. He saved us a lot on our 4x4 too. I will say that.
I
But
believe it.
because of
So
him, I
he was
was
the anchor?
exposed. Yeah, he was the anchor.
Yeah. Man, I went
Right.
to so I graduated. So I grew up was in Fort Worth for 12 years. And then I was in Lubbock, Texas for 7 years before moving to Salt Lake City.
Okay.
And my senior year of high school, graduated from high school in Lubbock, but we went to the state track meet in Austin. And so this would have been '01. It was a guy named Jonathan Johnson who ran. And it was just even though ultra running's my thing.
Mm.
I'm sorry. It was the 4x100. Is that true?
Oh, okay.
No, 4 by
That's the
400. He was like 200.
okay.
He was 200 meters behind, and he caught the guy. And it was just the most fun I've ever had. Like what's funny about watching 100 milers, it's like you're watching for like 18 hours,
Right.
but the
Yeah.
4 by 400, man, it's just the most exciting thing in running. I just love it so much. That's cool that you do
Yeah.
that.
3 minutes of straight sprinting. It's crazy.
That's great. So were you a 400-meter specialist in college?
No, so it kind of kept evolving because like I said before, I got into track late, so I really didn't know what I was good at.
Yeah.
So I got recruited for the 400. And when I got to college, I ran the 400 the first couple of years, and then I started
Okay.
dabbling in the 800. And the 800 is kind of where I sat. That was
Okay.
like, okay, this is where I want to be. I really
Yeah.
enjoyed, running the 800 because I personally didn't think I always had the speed for a 400
Mm,
runner. Like I would split 48, 49 on the 4x4, but
yeah.
the 800 is a 2 lap sprint essentially. And I've always had endurance. And I kind of knew that
Mm,
growing up as well. When we would do our practice, we would do our like mile time trial. I would always win it and I wasn't even a mile. So I was like, well, maybe I can kind of use this speed and just add endurance to it.
hmm.
So when I got to
Interesting.
college, my junior year is when coach was like, okay, we're going to make you, and shout out to Tony, my college coach, we're going to
Yeah.
make you a better 800 runner. So he threw me in cross country. And it's the first
Oh,
time, first time I've ever experienced cross country as a sport, and I'm doing it on a D1 level. So
so
I'm
you were
like, this
actually
is kind of
competing?
crazy.
You were actually
Yes.
competing. Nice. That's
Yeah.
fun.
And that's really what kind of got me into running long distance. So he just kind of threw me into the wolves, and I held my own. Um, so the conference meet of my senior year, I actually qualified for regionals and got to go to University
That's
of
great.
Arkansas. And it was crazy because I would have never guessed 5 years prior to that I'd be
Yeah.
competing on a national level in cross country running
And
an
so fun
8K.
that it was in Arkansas too.
Yeah, you're right back to right in Fayetteville. So
That's great.
that's really what kind of got me into running longer distance, and it dropped my 800 time. In the span of 2 years, I went from
Mm,
158 to 151.
wow.
So I was like, okay, definitely mileage is what's needed, for me to kind of progress. And when I graduated, I
Interesting.
knew that when, kind of with track, once you kind of finish college, if you don't go pro, that's kind of it. I mean, until you get to
Mm,
master's age, there's really
mm,
not much you can do. So for me, it was either stop running or start running more. And that's kind of how I got into how I got into road racing. I started
okay.
doing a lot in Spartan racing. I started running marathons. All of that
Mm.
was post college.
Oh, interesting. So what so after you left college, when was your first half marathon or marathon?
Yeah, it was actually a pretty big gap. So um, I had when I was trying to figure out the whole should I continue running or should I
Yeah.
stop? And I actually went 5 years without running after graduating college.
Whoa.
Basically just stagnant. And then
Yeah.
it was the Olympics actually in
Mm,
2021
okay.
where I was watching and I was getting so hyped because
Really?
this is what I do, this is what I love. And I'm like, man, I miss it. And so it was the Olympic trials in 2021 when I told myself, I'm going to run every day for a year. I'm just going to
Oh,
do it.
dang.
And so that's kind of what kick-started me getting back into running. And I was
Hmm.
averaging, I believe it was 4.5 miles a day for 365 days. And after that, after that, it was no stopping me.
So what was it at the Olympics specifically? Were you watching the track or was it the marathon? Or was it just all of it?
Yeah, it was all of it. It was really the 800. So
Okay.
because the thing is for me, my last race in college, um, I didn't even make it to the finals, and I was ranked, I think, 3 or 4 in the conference, and that
Oh,
was
dang.
so frustrating to me. So I always consider like my last race was my worst 800 of my entire life, and that to this day, that's like one of my
That hurts.
yeah, it hurts so much. And so when I see people be successful in it, it kind of, it kickstarted that like, well, maybe I can, go back in and try to fix it. Maybe I could run it again, run it better.
Mm.
And I didn't know that I was going to get into longer distances. My initial, idea was to try to get back in 800 shape. And it's funny because I think that I'm probably in the best shape of my life now that I've ever been, and I do no speed work.
Oh,
You
dang,
know,
really?
yeah. So I just always think like, well, if I were to ever get back into that, which I know I will, I'm pretty sure I will, because especially with the Olympics coming back around,
I
who
know.
knows what's going to happen this year?
Yeah.
I might start really trying to train for that again.
Hmm. What do you think of yourself as now in terms of, I mean, you're clearly, and we'll get to this, but you're clearly like an educator of sorts within the sport.
Right.
Um, and I know professionally, I believe you're a pharmacist. Is that true?
Yes, correct.
Okay. So you've got all this going, but then when you view yourself as a runner, are you looking, are you a marathoner? Are you a half marathoner? Are you still an 800 guy? Like, how do you see yourself?
Right now, I would say I'm a half marathoner. I thoroughly enjoy running half marathons. That's like
Really?
my go-to race. Um, I sometimes I try to, get into the 5K. I don't know if I necessarily have like I know I have the mile speed for the 5K, but I don't know if I can hold it, for 3 miles because,
Mm,
5K, I think my PR right now is 17:19. And,
dang.
to be competitive in it, I gotta drop at least another 3 minutes. So I never
Oh,
really
dang.
think about the 5K. With the half marathon though, I enjoy it because it's in that happy medium. So I've ran two
Hmm.
marathons before, and
Okay.
I definitely understand the addiction behind them, just the accomplishment that you feel from finishing them. I just don't think that I train enough to be competitive in that. And when I train, I always train to be competitive, just because that's just, it's where I came from.
Yeah.
So I normally don't just run something just to run it. I'm running it because I want to be good at it.
Yeah. Do you have your sights set on a particular half right now, or what sort of training block are you in right now?
Yes, that's an interesting subject because I haven't told anybody this, but I'm actually training to break the world record for the fastest half marathon wearing handcuffs. So, um, so I haven't told anybody that, but that's going
Oh
to
man,
be
that's
at the
fantastic.
at the Cowtown marathon at the end of February,
Yeah.
um, because it has to be at a world, championship or a USA track and field sanctioned race. And the Fort Worth marathon is one. That's actually where they used to have the world championships for the half marathon in the past
Really?
2 years were there.
When I was in
So,
elementary school, I'll share something now that I've never shared before because no one cares. But when I was in elementary school, I did the Cowtown 10K. We trained for it. I think my 10K time was like 2.5 hours. It's like a third grader.
I
So
mean, yeah, no, it's good
we
to
both
be
have
that
breaking
young
news here.
running. Yeah.
So how that this is fascinating. How did this world record come on your radar, and what interests you about it?
So the reason why it came in my radar is because I was looking for something to do. I was looking for something to train for. I had just recently, not was it last year, 2022, so the year before last, in December, I had just came off of the World Championships for Spartan. So I just
Okay.
came back from Abu Dhabi, and
Oh
I
dang.
felt like um, that I needed to work towards something else. It just took me a while to get there. So I just started
Yeah.
just kind of scrolling on Instagram, just looking for things to do. And I
Yeah.
ran across this page. He was like a serial Guinness World Record breaker. Like he literally just goes on the website, sees what he can break,
Yeah.
and does it. And so I was like, well, let me go on this website and see if there's something that I think I can do. And so that's how I went on there. I searched half marathon, and I just
Yeah.
started sifting through all the records. And I felt like for the one with handcuffs, it kind of spoke to me because I felt like I wanted to do one that really resonated with where I was in life mentally.
Hmm.
Sometimes I feel like, especially now, I was in a transition of like just mental battles, and I always felt
Yeah.
like, well, if I can break a world record wearing handcuffs, I mean, that means that no matter what, in life, theoretically speaking, I
Yeah.
could probably do it no matter how difficult or what obstacles are thrown at me. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like a symbolic thing.
Yeah. It's like an
Um,
external representation of what's happening inside of you.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
And
Man,
so when I
that's
saw
great.
the time is 1:25:19. And I'm like, I mean, I think I can do that. My PR right now is 1:20,
Okay.
and that was 2 years ago. So I don't even know. Um, I haven't like really sprinted a half marathon in a long time. I just ran one a couple of weeks ago, and I went
Okay.
1:22.
Oh,
Um,
nice. Just
so I'm
around your neighborhood, or was it just for fun, or was it a competitive
Yeah,
race?
it was actually in Fort Worth. It was just one of those, you get an email on run sign up like half
Yeah.
marathon in your area. And I was like,
Yep.
all right. And it was the time travel half marathon or something. The medal had sound effects. And so so I was like, I've never had a medal with sound effects before. So I signed up for it and just went out there. So that's kind of like my
uh,
my checkpoint right now. But I mean, wearing haircuts is going to be obviously a completely different issue, a different battle.
are you wearing them in the front or the back?
So I'll be wearing them in the front.
Okay, it
I,
makes me feel a little better in
thankfully.
case you trip.
Yeah. Yeah. Thankfully.
Hopefully you don't. Oh man. Okay, so talk to me a little bit about then, because a lot of what I talk about at Borderlands is this juggling of personal life and our just obsession with running. So I've seen on Instagram you've got you're a dad, I believe I've seen,
Right. Yeah.
and you're a pharmacist, and you're training for these big efforts that require a lot of time, and then you're a content creator, which most of the people that aren't don't know how much time that takes to get out
Right.
a 20-second video. Tell me a little bit about Tamar the dad and the pharmacist. What's your day in and day out life like?
Yeah. So, luckily for my career, I was able to, when I graduated, to get a remote pharmacist job. So I work a lot
Hmm,
with creating educational sheets for oncology patients, for the providers to hand out to them when they're,
got it.
counseling and kind of helping the patient understand what it is that they're about to go through, some of the, you know,
Got it.
changes in their lives that they're about to see, and how to essentially
Wow.
cope with them, and just be more aware of what's coming in the future. So because of that, I've had the opportunity to really stay at home, essentially all the time with my newborn, because he was born in June of last year. So he's only a little over seven, yeah, a little over
Oh,
7 months old. So just being able to be around with, with my wife, it's been a journey, but it's been definitely beneficial for us that I was able to,
yeah.
you know, get a job like this. And it also helps with, kind of like you said, with content creation, because I always think of it as, since I don't have to commute to and from work, that's kind of the time that I use to, create
Mm,
content. I just try to
yeah.
look at
Yeah.
areas where it's like, if I were to do this, I would lose this time. So how, now that I don't do have that time, how do I use it to my advantage?
Yeah.
So that's really kind of how I go about,
Hmm.
my time management and things like that.
Man, that's cool. So I mean, as we move kind of toward the content that you're creating, I opened up saying, "Hey, it's helped me with mechanics." And for context, in the world of ultra running,
Hmm.
there's phenomenal coaches out there. There's phenomenal resources, great with nutrition. I don't see a lot about form, and I think that's why the benevolent Instagram chose to send you my way, because there's no one in the ultra world creating this stuff.
Hmm.
And there's high mileage, let's say even 30 miles or more. A lot of us undertrained bad runners, like we're hunched over, our bodies are depleted, and there's nutritional stuff that we can be doing better that can help us with that. There's volume training that we can be doing better than that, and or to help with that. There's our large volume blocks can be done better where we train on the terrain that our race is going to be on, and that will help us. But
Hmm.
there's just no one that I'm seeing, at least every once in a while, an influencer creator in the space of ultra running, we'll talk about mechanics. So before we go into some specifics on that, is that how do you think of yourself as a creator? Is that how you see? I mean, you offer such practical advice on how to move your body when you run, along with some inspirational stuff. But is that how you think of it?
Yeah, and I think it's really kind of, overflowing from my job. I really enjoy kind of educating people and making things
Mm,
simple.
yeah.
And when I started content creating, which wasn't long ago, I started 15 months ago, actually.
Oh man, great,
So,
great amount of followers in that amount of time. About I think I saw like 42 or 43,000 already.
right, yes. Now it's
Great.
definitely been fun seeing
Yeah.
the number go up.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
bet.
but yeah, so when I first started getting into it, I kind of had that same idea that you were kind of touching on is, well, there's a ton of creators out there, but who's a creator that's taking that approach of trying to educate people on how to be better, more efficient,
Yeah.
energy conserving runners. Because that's kind of one thing that I learned when I really got into half marathon is you have to conserve energy as much as you can. You don't want your battery, excuse me, you don't want your battery to deplete, halfway through.
Yeah. Yeah.
And a lot of times, that comes from your form. It comes from how fast you start, negative splitting among other things. But you really
Hmm.
just do have to focus on that form and having great posture, hip strength, mobility, just because it allows your body to get used to it and to really propel yourself forward and as using as least energy as possible.
Yeah. Gosh, so many questions. Maybe one is where did you learn this stuff? Like when you're a college athlete, that's most of my
Mhm.
audience. We don't have that in our past. Do you get a lot of like really practical training like this when you're a athlete in high school and college? Is that where this came from?
Yeah, it is because I used to have terrible form.
Mm,
I've always been a relaxed runner since
yeah.
as far as I can remember, but you can be too relaxed as well. So when I got to college, one of the things that coach was trying to fix was my trying to be more relaxed in a better way. Because
Mm.
when I got to college, I would run like I would be the person that would be flopping their arms, when they're running because like
Yeah.
I'm just trying to,
Yeah.
my whole body's just limp.
Yeah.
And
You had the
so
hustle, but maybe not the form.
right. And so I learned a lot of tips, at Lamar, just trying to make my form a lot better. How to hold my hands, how to hold my wrist, how to drop my shoulders, chin low. I learned a ton of stuff at Lamar to really propel myself, and kind of take that next step because like like you said in the beginning, I was just running. I just go out there and say, okay, I got to get from point A to point B. Let's
Yeah.
do
Yeah.
it.
And that's what happens in ultra running most of the time because it's such an infectious soul sport that we go out and we try and run 50K and we do our best, and what we love, we end up falling in love with the suffering,
Hmm.
not in the moment, but when we look back on it, we're just like, we're proud of ourselves. We love the people, we love what it says about who we are, that we can do hard things and all that sort of stuff. But also there reaches this point where eventually, maybe like with what you're talking about, like the bad form, the arms flailing, there reaches a point where if I could get better at that stuff, I could go further,
Right,
or a little bit, I could improve my time.
right.
And so with you, as you started to learn this stuff at Lamar, and other resources, did you start to just see your times getting faster and faster, or were your recovery times getting better? What were the outright benefits of better form?
Yeah, I wouldn't say my times necessarily got faster from form. I think just everything that I was learning kind of essentially made me take the next step because what I was starting to understand was I'm not, like you said, I'm not as tired when I finish.
Yeah.
And so now I'm able to do at practice, I'm able to do more reps. And doing more reps allows my muscles to get stronger. And with stronger muscles, you're able to go further using less energy because,
Mm,
obviously they're bigger. And so now you won't take as much to go, let's say, a 3 meter stride versus a 3.5 meter stride. It's just,
mm,
it'll be a little bit easier. So I think that when my form started becoming, I guess, more on I would say more of a structured level, I was
hmm.
able to focus on other things. and I was able
Oh,
to do more. So, because I just think that a lot of people may not realize how, how efficient you can be if you just focus on that. And I've even seen runners go to the extreme. They call it T-Rex arms, where they kind of run like this, just so they can conserve energy. But I
yeah,
get I get the sentiment of it. I get what where they're trying to go with it. And
yeah.
I think that's kind of what happened with me is when I realized I was able to do more, that's kind of, what allowed me to take that next step.
Hmm. Yeah, that's cool. And in the like when you have better movement, when you have more efficient movement, I think that's the word you keep using. When you're more efficient,
Mm.
practically, does your heart rate stay lower? I mean, do you pay attention to that sort of? Are you a heart rate kind of focused runner?
Yes and no. I'm not necessarily a zone 2, zone 3 type of runner, but
Yeah.
I do focus on my heart rate in the sense that I don't ever like it to be, close to my max heart rate. So I look at it as
Okay.
like in that form. But when people say things like, run a conversational pace or run an easy pace, I I use those terms sometimes, but I really try to stay away from because it's different for everybody. For me specifically, I can run, 6:30 pace all day long, and my heart rate will be around zone 3. Like right now, my max heart rate is 190,
Okay.
because of my age. And
Hmm.
normally when I'm running 6:30s, my heart rate's floating around 165. But
Okay.
for a lot of people, they would say I'm working too hard because, they're focused on that. But for
Yeah.
me, I mean, I'm able to run that all day. I can talk to you, I answer the
Hmm.
phone, I'm
Yeah.
singing music, running down the street. So I'm doing all of this at 6:30 pace. And
Yeah.
when you look at it from that standpoint, it's kind of like, okay, well, I look at it as more like a habitual pace, I guess you could say.
Mm.
So a lot of people would say that you, looking at that, you are working too hard, but I mean, I'm just used to it. And I've tried running zone 2 running before, and it's just not something for me personally that
Yeah.
I want to do because in order for me to get my heart rate down to like 140, I'd have to run 9-minute pace. And that's
Yeah.
just not me
You're not
personally.
feeling it. I get it. I mean, because on some levels,
Yeah,
especially because you got the day job, you're a family man. If you're going to take the time to run, you also want to love every run.
right.
you know,
Yeah.
so that zone 2 stuff for me, that can put me at like 12 to 13 on a park run. And while I can connect the dots on like maybe some long-term value, I also just don't love it. And I want to, in order to do it, I need to be loving it a little bit more than that.
Right. Yeah, I agree with
Um,
that. And I've even, I've done things where sometimes I'll say, okay, like when I'm looking at my training plan, if I just don't have the time, to run that many miles at that pace, then that
yeah.
also factors into it as well.
Mm,
Not everybody necessarily has the time to go on a 3-hour run or a 2.5-hour run.
right.
So it's kind of like you have to use the time that you have and not necessarily get as many miles as you can out of that time because you shouldn't,
Yeah.
obviously you shouldn't run every run as
Yeah.
fast as possible, as
Right.
quickly as possible.
Yeah. I
But
think
if you
I
can,
saw that on your Instagram. Like, because there's a big trend going around of like if you run slower to run faster,
right,
and I got real confused, and so I'm a sucker, so I started running slower, and I realized I'm not running faster, but you've stated the obvious that honestly very few people did. You still have to run fast like twice a week.
right,
You can
right,
just chill the other five. You can not push it as hard the other five, but you don't run faster by running slower if you 100% of the time run slower.
right. You still have to work on those fast twitch muscles,
Yeah.
if you're always utilizing the muscles that allow you to just kind of pick your feet up and just lay them back down, then that's what you're going to be used to at the race. You still have to have
Yeah.
those hot steps. You have to work on those twitch muscles. So,
Yeah.
um, like I said, it's really more of like they say the 80-20 rule.
Yeah.
But I just always say if you can do it once or twice a week, then you're on the right track. And then just
Yeah.
like I said before, the other runs, you just kind of chill, run the pace you want to run, have fun with it, like
Yeah.
you said, and everything will fall into place.
Yeah. As we, as I kind of approach landing the plane here with our conversation, the piece of advice that then made me want to reach out to you because you put it on there, you put it on your Instagram and I tried it and I was like, oh, I get it. Like, yeah, I've been running for 10 years. I've been trying for the 100-mile distance for like 7. And you were talking about something about maybe getting tired less or whatever, but like running with your hamstrings, picking up your leg
Mm-hmm.
as opposed to pushing your leg out or something
Mm-hmm.
like that. And so basically, I know I'm getting that wrong, so I'll have you explain a little bit better here in a second. But once I started picking up my leg like you showed in the video, I was like, oh my gosh, I can run further now with better form. It's
Mm-hmm.
it's in my park runs is where I'm really focusing on it. And now like that I'm doing it, it's like, yeah, that's a much stronger muscle. And my muscles that go the quickest in ultras are always my hip flexors.
All
So
right.
I thought that was interesting. And so this is where I get kind of selfish. So first, explain what I just said better. And second, aside from really just about every post that you do being practically useful, what sort of tips would you have for me, that would help me with my running form, that would help me survive, keep strength, run more efficiently, thinking up, mile 60, 70, or 80. So first, correct me, explain that principle a little bit better about running with your hamstrings.
Yeah, for sure. So a lot of people, when they run, they don't normally utilize their hamstrings because it's more of like a drag. I don't want to say a drag, but that's kind of like the best way to put it is people
Yeah.
just kind of run through the motions. But when you're actually utilizing your hamstrings, you can feel it when you're utilizing it. You're able
Yes.
to kind of propel yourself a little forward more. You know, you have that energy,
Mm-hmm.
and you're able to kind of take a bigger leap, I guess you could say, almost like
Yeah.
a jump.
Yep.
Um, and so when you do that, it not only helps you take that higher leap, but now you have more energy and you have more you're better in a better position to push down as well. So
Mm.
and it's kind of like a sprinting thing. So when you're,
Yeah.
they always say you have to, kind of hop like that, and be quick on your
Mm.
feet.
Yeah.
But when you actually focus on using your hamstrings, it's just a muscle that a lot of people, like you said, they have stronger hamstrings. Is never really kind of think about it, and
Mm.
it really just helps with your energy efficiency, and kind of allow you to really just run more or run with a better form, if you
Mm.
will. I don't know if
Yeah,
that makes
because
sense.
that muscle you're picking up your leg
Right.
with with a strong muscle compared to when you're like, we'll call it like the ultra shuffle, when our
Hmm.
late race and our form is awful, you're barely picking your feet up off the ground. By the time you're at that point, the muscles that you're using are just not used. They're not
Right.
used to being used. So yeah, I mean, to me, and I'll make sure and post it in the show notes, like that Instagram post where you showed that. So as we describe it
Hmm.
verbally, we can also people can click on it and see you
Right.
demonstrating it. I see you talk about plyometrics. Is something like that useful to someone trying to go 100 miles?
Well, I think that in the beginning, yes. But when you start getting to muscle fatigue, probably around like I would assume mile 40 and above,
Yep.
um, plyometrics don't necessarily help as much. Um, by then, it's more so, as we all know, the mental game. I mean, you even have the mental game in the marathon as well.
Yep.
Not nearly as much, but when it comes to things like that, I think the things that will kind of help you is, for me personally, is to kind of not necessarily think about the distance and not really look ahead, but look down and focus on your next step. Every
Hmm.
step. How can this next step be better?
Hmm.
I like to talk about, in some of my tips, proprioception, you know, which
Hmm.
is a lot of trail runners. They have to
Yep.
use that, especially with all the rocks and the pebbles. When you get to that point and you start really getting into your head, um, lean into it. I'm an
Hmm.
emotional runner. I
Yeah.
like to consider myself an emotional runner. Some of my best runs are runs that I'm crying, and not crying in the
Hmm.
sense of like mad or sad, but like frustration that things aren't quote
Hmm.
unquote going my way. But
Hmm.
those are always my best runs because it's like, well, I I kept going. Not only did I keep going, but I finished, and
Yeah.
now I'm better because of it.
Hmm.
So when you're in your head and you're having these mental battles, For me, I just always kind of lean into them and
Mm,
just let it play out. And I think that's more so what would be beneficial versus like using things like plyometrics at that, and at that end of the race, that late race
yeah.
survival aspect.
Yeah. So you're saying you kind of embrace the moment,
Right.
uh, and in as much as you still have brain power available, really still think about how to make an efficient next step,
Right.
even if don't just like give up. Basically, once you give up on
Right.
more
Yeah.
efficient running, you're kind of giving up on the race.
You're giving up on a lot of things, and as long as you just, if you, I mean, I understand the battle. I mean,
Yeah.
when you get to that point, it's just, I don't know. I mean, I've never done it, but I can definitely
Yeah.
wholeheartedly understand the
Yeah.
battle. And
Yeah.
I know that, it's easier said than done, but I think that, as long as you're, as much as you can, trying to focus on the little things, then
Yeah.
it's kind of like a puzzle. The big picture comes into play at the end. You just have to
Yeah.
take it piece by piece.
Yeah. You just came off of 31 days of running tips in a row for the month of January. Of those tips, which ones hit hardest? What were the biggest ones that you could share here? One or two, that seemed like they resonated the most.
Yeah, I think it's the biggest tip so far that I've kind of seen is when I tell people, to focus on dynamic stretching, and less
Mm-hmm.
on static stretching when it comes to warming up,
That was going to be my last
because
question too. Because that's your post that has like 2 million hits.
right,
Because you're
yeah,
talking mobility.
yeah,
Because this is my question: is mobility? Because you get so tight late race. I don't mean to cut you off, but
right.
you've gone
No,
exactly where
you're
I want to
good.
go. This is great. So keep going.
Yeah, and I think the reason why that resonates with so many people is, when they think about, okay, I'm about to start running, let me go outside, and people that have no knowledge of running at all, the first thing they do is, start stretching, and that doesn't necessarily prepare you for a run,
Yeah.
as much as dynamic stretching does. Because dynamic
Mm.
stretching not only does it warm up your muscles, but it prepares your muscles to do what you're about to do, going through the motions, kind of preparing your legs to know, okay, my legs going to be going up and down, up and down. It's not going to be this
Mm-hmm.
straight, touching the ground.
Right.
Um, and
Right.
then another thing, with that is when you do stretch, or static stretch cold muscles, um, in the extreme case, I like to think of it as like trying to stretch a cold rubber band, to
Mm.
pop. And, that doesn't happen, but that's, kind of how I try to explain it. Like your muscles need to be warm, for you to start stretching. So
Yeah.
I personally always tell people, do it after the run, but you can static stretch after warm up as well, if that's what you're used
Mm.
to. It's just
Yeah.
best to, warm them up first. And I think that's why that one always resonates with people, because it's like something like, oh, I didn't know that, And so
Yeah.
normally that, I think that's why everybody loves that tip.
Yeah.
Um, and then a second tip is and I'm sure most trail runners know this, but wearing the proper, size shoes. You need to have that space in your shoes for it to move back and forth, especially when you're
Mm.
running super long distances. Um, when your feet start swelling up from
Mm-hmm.
running, you don't
Yeah.
want your shoes to get tight. And that's how
Yeah.
people, start having those bruises, black toenails, and things like that. So
Interesting.
that's another one people always, kind of
So
say thank you
do
for.
you do you recommend like a half size up, or I mean, people can kind of feel it out, but what's your general rule of thumb?
Yeah, I reckon in the beginning I have size up because it's something to get used to. Don't get me
Yeah.
wrong. Like if you're not used to having that much room in your shoe, you don't want to just
Yeah.
jump up to a size. But I go a full size up. But for people who
Whoa.
don't really, understand, or not understand, but really don't know what it feels like in the beginning, I think a half size is good. And once you start really getting into running, then you'll start seeing how much, of an improvement to your foot health it will have.
Hmm.
Um, and then you can start, messing around with the full size.
Yeah, that's great. Well, one last question here for you, and it's general, and I mean, and this is going to show you really, and I think I represent the average runner who's non-elite in trail running, but this kind of shows you where it's at. Like we don't talk about mobility. I've only had one other person kind of even mention it to me offhand. Can you give me just kind of a high level explanation of mobility, and then maybe even why mobility, regularly integrating some sort of mobility exercises or, before your runs, what is the benefit of that?
Yeah, so the biggest benefit is really just so you're not stiff. The best way to run is to run relaxed and to, focus on form. And it's kind of hard to do that if your muscles are tight, if they're stiff.
Mm,
And when you're going through the motions, you know, you're not, every time you go running, you're not going to do the same warm up. You may not always have the time to do the same warm up. Some people
right.
use their first mile as their warm up. They just start off really, really slow and then
Yeah.
kick it off. And so, in regards to mobility, the reason why that's important to do on those days where, you maybe have a day off, you focus on that hip mobility, you focus on that knee mobility. It helps lubricate those joints and kind of keep
Mm,
them, primed for the the runs or the workouts that you're going to do in the future.
yeah.
And it really just helps give that cushion in within your joints so you don't have that knee pain, hip pain, have that full range of motion because your body is used to going through those mobility exercises and going through
Mm,
those dynamic stretches. And it really helps for people who are for sprinting for sure, but like people who get tight towards the end of their race, like their 5Ks or 10Ks or marathon. A lot of
yeah.
people start getting into themselves. They start looking up and they start kind of doing this thing. Well, if
Yes.
you kind of focus on always just being,
Yeah.
relaxed and knowing that
Hmm.
this your body's made to move, it's not made to be tense.
Yeah.
And so that's
Do you
just
think it can
that's
loosen
really
up
a
mid
big reason
race?
why.
Like let's say marathon, you know, if you're feeling tight, because when we're ultras, we're not terribly worried about our finish time. So let's say late race
Mm.
of marathon, late race of a ultra, feeling stiff. You could do our mobility exercises useful when you're in the act, or are they really only like a preventative thing that you want to do before, like in the months leading up to the race?
Yeah, it's really more of a preventative thing. In the act, kind of one thing that I always do is I'll do this and then drop it. That way I know, I'm not tense. Like I'll bring it up and drop. So
Mm,
I'll do that with my
yeah,
arms. Like when I'm running a marathon, I'll do it a lot where I'll just instead of always doing this, sometimes I just drop them and kind of let them hang. So I know,
interesting.
okay,
That you know that you still got something. That's
yeah,
interesting.
yeah. So that way it's not like because you'll start feeling pain and especially in the longer races in places you've never felt pain before.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so it's just good to always kind of like just make sure
mm,
you're not, tensed up and flexing muscles that you shouldn't be flexing and
yeah,
conserving that energy for later on.
yeah, yeah. That's great. Well, Tamara, thanks for joining. I could talk to you all day about this stuff. You're so good at explaining it, and I'll make sure and point everybody in your direction on Instagram. But yeah, thank you so much for doing this, and I hope we can do it again sometime.
Yeah, it's no problem. Thank you for having me.
All right, man. Talk to you soon.